Food is something we all have in common. After all, we all need to eat, right? Which sounds pretty simple, but it isn't. Food is so much more than nutrition. It's culture, it's identity, it's rooted in our memories. It's something deeply connected to our humanity. But food is also power, too, because unfortunately for many people, they hold no power over what they eat or how they access food. They don't have a choice. I first learned about power as a chef who transitioned from working in restaurants to now running a community kitchen working for a charity. That transition occurred about 10 years ago. I'd left my job at a busy and popular restaurant. At the time, I disliked what food had become for me. I kind of resented it. It was a commodity to sell, nothing more, nothing less. I knew I needed to make a change, wasn't sure what the next step would be, but what I did know is that I needed to find somewhere where food meant something more. And that's when I found the Parkdale Food Center, a charity that operates a food bank, but also has a big, beautiful commercial kitchen. It was the perfect landing spot for a wayward chef. Initially, before I was hired as the kitchen manager, I started by volunteering there. I can distinctly remember my first time arriving to find a kitchen bustling with energy, joy, and laughter, an atmosphere I definitely wasn't used to. That day, there was at least 20 people packed into the kitchen, all walks of life, young and old. There's no defined volunteer, staff, or patron. It was just a community of people who wanted to cook and eat together. It was incredibly chaotic and very messy. It was kind of a chef's worst nightmare, but it was also fun and genuine. Afterwards, when I came home, my wife asked me, "How was it?" And I think I responded something like, "Yeah, it was great. People were just genuinely happy to share food together." And then it hit me. I'd never experienced that exact feeling in my almost 20 years of professional cooking. It was a shock to the system, to say the least. Working at Parkdale did require a very steep learning curve for me, though. I had no understanding of how charities worked, or food banks for that matter. I think I expected to show up and teach people how to eat better and solve the problem. I couldn't have been more wrong. I'd say that's still the biggest misconception of what my job is there. I don't really teach. In fact, it's safe to say I've learned far more than I could ever impart. You see, food insecurity and food literacy aren't as closely tied together as you might think. In my experience, many of the people who accessed the meal and cooking programs were far more skilled than a lot of the professional cooks I'd ever worked with. Which kind of makes sense when you think about it, right? Because when you hold no power over what you eat or how you access food, you need to be far more resourceful than someone who can simply buy whatever they want whenever they want it. On any given day in the Parkdale kitchen, you might find an indigenous organization making stew out of wild game, a mother making beautiful Egyptian flatbread for her community, a Nigerian volunteer who doesn't think the chef knows how to make rice the right way. She's right. Or a group of Chinese seniors who come every year to make hundreds and hundreds of dumplings by hand for Lunar New Year. What's really cool is we often don't even speak the same language, but it works anyways. Food does that. It strips us of our perceived differences. You see, those meals aren't just about food. They're about diversity, dignity, and understanding each other. And what becomes obvious to you right away is that the most important ingredient in those recipes is the voice of the person who brought it forward. You see, by giving the community a voice in the kitchen, we return that power to where it belongs. When people have a say over what they eat, the dynamic shifts from dependency to dignity. The kitchen ceases to be a place where people are simply served and becomes one where they're included. It's an amazing job. I'm lucky to have it, but there's also a deep sadness to it. What's sad is that despite our best efforts to provide and advocate for a better experience for people who are food insecure, is that at the end of the day, we still belong to a food charity system that was never meant to be a permanent solution to what is now a chronic problem. A problem that has nothing to do with food. Remember that part. I think what many people don't realize or remember if you're old enough is that food banking started in Canada in the early 1980s in response to a recession. It was intended to be like a quick patch to help get people through a difficult time. A bridge. But since then, that bridge has hardened into concrete, and now for millions of people, it's the only road. See, food charities don't solve hunger. They intend to manage it, to move the problem along quietly, all while absolving us from finding real solutions to addressing it. Charities rely almost entirely on goodwill to operate with next to zero support from any level of government. But here's the catch. What arrives at food banks isn't always generosity, it's often surplus. It could be food that's too close to expiry to be sold to the consumer. It's also food that's just expired. Mostly, though, it's food that's just unwanted. That unwanted food is then handed down and spun as a kind of gift, a corporate dumping ground in exchange for a tax receipt. Or worse, an opportunity to call what most of us would consider waste philanthropy. Who here has donated some food they no longer wanted or needed? Perhaps you felt guilty about wasting it and throwing it out, so you give it to a charity. But people deserve more than that, because whose needs are we really serving? For many people, their experience at a food bank is reinforced by the idea that you should just be grateful and never question it. I've seen it in people's faces. The quiet apology when they don't want what's offered to them, or worse, the shrug, the resignation. It doesn't matter if I don't want this. It's all there is. If you're getting the impression that this experience can be undignified for people, then you'd be right. And as a society, we've learned to accept this way of caring for each other instead of lifting each other up, or at the very least, listening to the needs of those we intend on helping. We insist upon propping up a system that does neither. And there's the contradiction. Again and again, we design systems and policies without the voices of the people most impacted, building something about people but without them, recreating the same power structure that causes the problem in the first place. I think in order to find solutions, there's something that we all need to understand. We've all been sold a false bill of goods. Many of us, myself included, were raised to believe that canned food drives and food banks were adequate solutions. And I'm not here to guilt you or make you feel bad or bully you into changing your mind on the subject. I think we could probably all agree there's enough of that happening in the world right now. But there's something we need to understand. Currently, 10 million Canadians are struggling to put food on the table. 1 in 4 residents of our city are food insecure. What that means is about a quarter of our country's population is now relying on a system that was intended to be a patch 40 years ago. That's no longer an emergency. That's a crisis. The reality of the situation is, and this is from someone who knows firsthand, is that food charity alone will not sustain us. It can't, because it was never designed to. Food insecurity is a complex issue, but food shortage is not one of them. There's way more than enough food to go around. Food insecurity is intertwined with poverty, discrimination, and economic insecurity. And by throwing food at those problems, we're basically throwing wet paper towel at what is now a raging forest fire. So, here's the challenge I'm going to leave you with. Instead of holding another canned food drive at your workplace or kids' school, ask yourself why it's necessary in the first place. What's at the root of the problem, and then take action. I bet most people here probably don't even know where their local food bank is, how it's funded, or what its needs are. Ask them and find out. Because what's positive is that there is a growing movement amongst grassroots organizations to advocate and provide for better. They need allies. Most importantly, though, we need to start asking harder questions of our leaders and of ourselves, because food insecurity is not a partisan issue. It's the result of bipartisan neglect. We shouldn't accept food banks as permanent infrastructure, not when they're funded by goodwill instead of public investment. We can demand more than charity, because food insecurity will not be solved by efficiency. It will be healed by relationships and by divesting ourselves of a harmful and unsustainable system. Because in the end, what people are really hungry for is dignity.